I might have I might have done a few pulls on these banners. Well then, hello and welcome to another character review, and today we are finally talking about the one and only Wriothesley, which I will be calling WRIZZLY throughout the video because his name is kinda dumb. Finally, after 1.5 years, he got his first rerun, which is so absurd to think about how much MiHoYo just hates Cryo. So, WRIZZLY is a Cryo Catalyst user. He's a main DPS focused on his normal and charge attacks. He's very similar to Scaramouche as we will see in his abilities, but being Cryo opens up a good amount of synergies with plenty of teammates that differentiate him from Scara, and he is a new style of DPS for Cryo since Ayaka is mainly burst focused and Ganyu is a slow charge attack bow DPS. And that differentiates WRIZZLY, as we said, as he is mostly normal and charge attack based. So, I think we don't need a ton of introduction. Again, I think that's enough because we've been waiting far too long. So, shall we get into his abilities? Starting off with his attacks, since they are, as mentioned, a core part of his kit. WRIZZLY is a Catalyst user, but he is a melee ranged one since he uses his mechanical gauntlets to punch his enemies. His combo is decently fast, with only the last attack being a bit slow, and for his charge attacks he performs an uppercut attack. Fairly simple. Also needing a mention is that even though all of his attacks are done using giant heavy gauntlets, only his charged attack is considered a blunt attack, which means that only his charged attack will cause shatter on a frozen enemy and cause good damage to Geo or even Cryo shields. As for his skill, because that's about it for his attacks, it's extremely similar in nature to Scara's. WRIZZLY does a small dash and empowers his attacks. While above 50% HP, his normal attacks will deal extra damage while draining his HP. He also gets some resistance to interruption, but it's very negligible. So, as said, he's very similar to Scara, and the way his multipliers work is exactly the same, where his empowered attacks are multiplied on top of his normal attack talent, so leveling both is crucial compared to other characters like Ayato, where you only need to level up the skill. And as for WRIZZLY's burst, it's exactly like Scara's, but horizontal this time, or a fast Ayaka burst. WRIZZLY fires off an ice attack that travels very quickly forwards, dealing multiple hits of cryo damage, and also this ability is how WRIZZLY activates his Pneumosia mechanic, not that you will ever notice it anymore. It deals a decent amount of damage, but it isn't a priority at all, so use it whenever. As we will see later, there isn't a need to build energy recharge on WRIZZLY. As for his talents, his first one completely complements his skill, but isn't tied to it. So when WRIZZLY's HP falls below 60%, he gains a buff that will make his next charged attack deal extra damage, have no stamina cost, and it will replenish 30% of WRIZZLY's max HP. This is the bread and butter of WRIZZLY's combo. You use his skill to drain his HP and activate this talent, and then fire off a powerful charge attack that will heal him and re-allow you to drain his HP again. But this talent does have a 5 seconds cooldown, which unfortunately means that you can't have a never-ending combo of charge attacks and normal attacks, and it hurts quite bad because WRIZZLY being a catalyst means that his non-buffed charge attacks cost a whopping 50 stamina to use if you wanted to use one without the talent. Which can be done in order to maybe prolong the draining of HP, because a normal charge attack doesn't drain his HP when his skill is active, but 50 stamina because he's a catalyst user is quite a lot. Or of course, as we said, because they're blunt attacks, you might want to break a shield faster or something. And as for his second talent, which is tied to his skill, simply put, when WRIZZLY activates his skill and his HP increases or decreases, he gains an attack buff up to 30%, which is a good chunk of attack. That is the main kit, and as said, it's very similar to Scara, but instead of using normal attacks, praying to RNG, and then dashing, you use normal attacks, and when the talent activates, you smash your opponent's jaw with a charged attack. As for his early cons, they are both pretty influential, although WRIZZLY works perfectly fine at C0, but his C1 and C2 can change up his playstyle a bit if you desire that. His C1 makes it so whenever WRIZZLY completes a normal attack combo, he activates his first Ascension talent, allowing you to use his empowered charge attacks much more than before, and his C1, compared to the talent, only has a 2.5 seconds cooldown. And to clarify, his talent and the C1 are different. So if his HP falls below 60%, then the talent will normally activate and start its 5-second cooldown. So yeah, his C1 is really nice, and additionally, it buffs his empowered charge attacks even more and extends his skill duration, which can help with some rotations, although of course might not because of buff timings and whatnot. But if you want to finish off an enemy, let's say because they've got like 5% HP left or 10% HP, instead of wasting your stuff and wasting your time, just with the extension of the skill, just destroy the enemy. So if you want to empower your WRIZZLY and get some more fun, I would say while playing him, his C1 is really nice. I did go for it after getting his weapon at least, and it is actually really fun. The better frequency of using his charge attacks for lots of damage and the buff, of course, that it gives is seriously really nice in the Abyss and in other and in combat events. Compared to when I've tried my friend's non-C1 WRIZZLY, and well, sure, he worked fine when his HP dropped below 60%. The C1 is really, really nice. And as for his C2, it's tied to his second Ascension talent, funnily. And now instead of just giving you attack, the talent now also gives you burst damage up to 200%. And this is where you would want to invest into energy recharge, since the burst will now deal a really significant amount of damage alongside his attacks. And it's also another point of similarity with Skara, because his C2 also increases his burst damage. So that's the kit plus cons, and it is pretty straightforward with good value in early cons, but works perfectly at C0. Let's move on to artifacts, and you all know that you're gonna be running Maricus Hunter. There are some other choices while you farm Maricus Hunter, but you should have had plenty of time to prepare for him. Other sets that are somewhat comparable are Unfinished Reverie, which is the burning set that you usually use for Emily, that WRIZZLY can use in burn melt teams, but Maricus Hunter usually even outperforms it even in those teams. And Blizzard Strayer is the classic freeze set, but it's only 4% crit rate above Maricus Hunter, so while it's okay while you farm Maricus Hunter, it immediately goes off the radar once you get an okay Maricus Hunter set. You might think something like Shimenawa's is a decent idea, and while it might give you some higher numbers on WRIZZLY's attacks because it gives you a really big 50% normal and charge attack damage buff, the value of the crit rate that Maricus Hunter gives outshines those higher numbers. And to put it simply, it's better to always crit with lower numbers using Maricus Hunter than sometimes crit with higher numbers using Shimenawa's. As for stats, your stats should either be attack or EM. Attack is more universal, and EM only in melt/burn melt teams if you can set one up. Goblet is of course cryo damage, and Circlet will most likely be crit damage since WRIZZLY has a lot of sources of crit rate. And substats are crit, of course, then EM/attack depending on the team, and finally energy recharge, as there isn't any other useful stat, but as mentioned, don't try to prioritize it at all unless you have a C2. And on to teammates, and WRIZZLY has plenty of synergies compared to some other cryo units. You can either play WRIZZLY in a freeze/mono cryo team to maximize his damage, or try melt/burn melt and still have WRIZZLY deal most of the team's damage, but depending on teammates, they can also contribute a good amount. Let's start with other cryos. Shenhe is the one and only cryo buffer, and she is perfect for WRIZZLY. I don't think we need to go into detail for her. Kaya is nice as a sub DPS, and in freeze he is a really good battery, and in non-freeze he can easily be used to set up stuff like Cryo Swirl or Cryo Crystallize for Zilonen or Archaic Petra. Same with Rosaria, but she has a crit rate buff, even though Cryo is not short on those kinds of buffs. Diona is fine for battering, shielding, and her C6 EM buff for melt, but her burst range is abysmal, so she doesn't stack that well. Layla is nice for her shield, and she can hold Tenacity of the Millilith for some attack buffing. Mika is nice as a team-wide healer, and his attack speed buff, while less useful on WRIZZLY because his attacks have more hit lag than other catalysts, it's still nice and can make WRIZZLY feel a bit more smooth to play. I did try an attack speed WRIZZLY, and it was really fun, even if, again, the attack speed buffs aren't 100% useful on WRIZZLY compared to others. And with C1, it does allow you to complete his attack combo faster to activate it, so maybe. Charlotte is mainly a team-wide healer option, and Kitlali doesn't buff anything cryo-related, but she is one of your only Cinder City options, and she does give a shield. Hydro for freeze next, and anybody's useful. Xingqiu and Yellen for application and their own share of damage, Mona for her buffs, Kokomi for healing, and Furina of course for her buffs, and WRIZZLY stacks her ultimate on his own, just like Neuvillette. Anemo next, and it's the same here, you just need a very decent holder, so pick and choose what is available. Kazuha is Kazuha, Sucrose for melt because of her EM buff, Xianyun for team-wide healing and potential extra damage through plunge attack, although WRIZZLY's skill does not increase his plunge attack damage, so it's not the best. Lanyan for shields, and I saved Jan for last because she is a special case. Well, not only does she have her powerful team-wide healing and her C2 has an attack speed buff, but when paired with the Bennett, which you can easily guess is a prime companion for WRIZZLY, they make for a really good melt combo, allowing WRIZZLY to melt a really good portion of his damage. And I saved this combo for last because Jan is a standard character, so she is easy to get, and Bennett is Bennett. It's simply a very accessible combo, even if you have to play Circle Impact. Jan's burst does have a little bit of a lower AoE, and her duration is here and there, but still, it's an amazing combo to just very easily to melt with WRIZZLY's charge attacks. And in my testing, it can even perform very closely to a standard mono cryo team with someone like Kazuha. And here is where you would use your EM stats. And speaking of melt, let's get into Pyro. Xian Link works the same as Jan without the healing, when paired with Bennett. They allow WRIZZLY to melt a good amount. Toma is nice for his slow pyro application and shield alongside his C6 buff, but he isn't going to, on his own, allow you to melt, so you would need somebody else to give you some more pyro application. Daisha is fine as a quote-unquote shielder and a bit of application, and if you want to use Mavuika to support WRIZZLY, then go ahead. And let's not mention Pyro Traveler, while they would have been a free Cinder City user for WRIZZLY, their abilities are so bad, it's not worth it. Dendro comes next for the Burn Melt that I have been mentioning, which is a composition that has existed since Dendro was introduced, and it was mainly used by Ganyu, because of her slow charge attacks. But WRIZZLY can use it as well, and it's very simple. Use Pyro and Dendro for burning, and because burning puts a Pyro aura on an enemy for an extended duration, it allows a cryo character to melt their stuff. Honestly, once again, all Dendros have their merits, providing something while sacrificing something else. The main contender is Amelie, since she is the main burning sub-DPS and helps with burning damage, good application and her own personal damage. After that comes Nahida for her special application and EM buffs. Yao Yao is nice for her healing and OK application for this scenario, followed by Baizu for his team-wide healing, OK application, and small shield that can help WRIZZLY a bit, and Kirara has a shield, and that's about it for her. Thankfully, of course, in Burn Melt, you most likely will not need a Deepwood holder because burning doesn't deal Dendro damage, and your main focus is to melt cryo damage. So Deepwood, you won't necessarily need two Dendros. Two Dendros can give you Dendro Resonance, which will give WRIZZLY an EM buff. So it depends, but again, pick and choose what is available. Other than those, your flex options are in Geo most likely, where once again the classics and new classics appear once more. The CEO of GEO provides the best shield with its Res Shred, and with Archaic Petra, which I did farm lately and tried on him, and it wasn't half bad, he can buff WRIZZLY a bit more. Zilonen is busted, I don't think I need to say much there. Albedo in Melt/Burn Melt has a bit of an EM buff. Yunjin buffs normal attacks, and she gives a small attack speed buff at C6, but she only buffs normal attacks where, they're kind of half of WRIZZLY's whole thing, so she is lower, she stacks lower compared to other Geo characters or flex options. Chiori can give some good off-field DPS alongside another Geo construct unit, and Kachina can hold Cinder City, and that's about it. She doesn't really do much else. That's all the units that WRIZZLY can use. They are plenty. As you can see, it is a hefty amount with various playstyles. In the background footage, you can see me try many of them, including an attack speed plus melt combo with Mika, Jan, and Bennett, and it worked amazingly, and was really fun to play. Yes, this current Abyss has a charge attack damage buff, but even without it, in Domains or the first half of the Abyss, which I've tried it, WRIZZLY still performs really, really well with this combo. So, shall we finish off with weapons? For 4 stars, there are some decent options and free-to-play ones at that. The Wriothesley is a classic, and even in Mono Cryo, where the EM buff is useless, it still averages well compared to other 4 stars. Please, for the love of whatever you believe in, do not use Solar Pearl on WRIZZLY, because you saw me Hoyo put it on him in trial builds. If you watch my version reviews where combat events existed during Fontaine and they had WRIZZLY as a trial character, you'll also hear me there absolutely go nuts on the fact that you're using Solar Pearl on him. It's bad, and WRIZZLY simply cannot use it, because in order to gain the buff on your attacks, you need your skill or burst to hit, and you're not going to be launching WRIZZLY's burst every now and then. Even at C2, I wouldn't recommend it. Right, and his skill doesn't deal damage. There's nothing on his skill or anything in his kit that deals elemental skill damage to give you the buff. So why the fuck did they put Solar Pearl on him? Anyways, next up, Dodoko Tails was a free weapon they gave us in like 1.6 for Klee or something, and it's fine but falls behind almost all other 4 stars. The Fontaine Craftable Flowing Purity is a very good choice only if you can R5 it. Very comparable even between 5 stars, but getting the billets can be a pain in the ass, but it is a very good free-to-play option. For 5 stars, let's get most of them out of the way since they are all very close to each other, mostly as stat sticks or small buffs. The standard weapons, Lost Prayers and Skyward Atlas, are both very good options, especially if you're able to refine them if you just have 2 or 3 of them lying around and you're just not pulling for catalysts, or you just don't need them. Like, refining a Lost Prayers would be good. Both of them work and are good with WRIZZLY, especially as said Lost Prayers, really good for the crit rate, and because WRIZZLY stays on the field for a decent amount of time, Lost Prayers gets its buff out. Memory of Dust, yes, that Memory of Dust, is an insane attack stat stick if you have a shielder in the team, or with Crystallize, but that isn't the most reliable. Kagura's Verity, which is Yaemiko's weapon, is mostly a crit stat stick. Same with Tome of the Eternal Flow, which is Nuvillette's weapon, but that does give you some charge attack damage added on top. And finally is Surf's Up, which is Moalani's weapon, which is also a crit stat stick, but this one gives you normal attack damage compared to Tome of the Eternal Flow. So the only other 5 stars that remain and slightly surpass these ones are Tuletula's Remembrance, Skara's weapon. It has good base attack, which WRIZZLY likes because he's an attack scaler, and crit substats while giving a bit of attack speed and hefty normal attack damage buffs, which makes it go higher than the other crit weapons. And last is WRIZZLY's own weapon, Cash Flow, which is his best, go figure. And that's it! We had to wait so long to get a WRIZZLY rerun, so that I would be able to create this video and for us to live our JoJo fantasies, since they used Daisuke Ono on the guy that punches a lot. You know very well this was planned. They had this planned for long ago. And yeah, I'm happy. I like my WRIZZLY. I would log into my friend's account if they were away or something and play with their WRIZZLY, and he's just fun to play. And again, it's really awesome to actually be able to play a melt team with Cryo if I use Bennett and John, if they are available in an event, or if I'm not using them in another team in the Abyss. Like, it's really fun. Would I pull for WRIZZLY if you're a big Ayaka fan or Ganyu fan? Maybe if you like the man. I've had Ayaka since 2.0, but I just got bored of her, and she cannot really play Melt that easily, so I really like him. As for the future of character reviews, my primos are drained, as you saw, like crazy, so let's see if I will be able to grab an Ifa maybe in the future. Let's see what he is going to be, if he is a Pyro character, which I think the leak said maybe she'll support WRIZZLY in Melt and be a Cinder City holder and actually make WRIZZLY busted as fuck. And yeah, because I couldn't care less for the other Natlan units, I'm just not pulling. Maybe Skirk? Child's master will have something interesting. Oh wait, they're making her Cryo. Oh boy. Anyways, yeah, I don't know what we're gonna be doing for character reviews. As for future videos, the Abyss is going to be resetting in a while, and also the version is gonna end in like 2 weeks, so those two videos are gonna come back to back most likely, so I'll wait for those. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed the review, and I'll see you in another video. Goodbye.